Hey, y'all, and welcome back to Lead Like a CEO. I'm your host, Chevy. And today, welcome to August. This is a month where we have our kids going back to school, especially if you're here in the South or if you're East Coast, like Jersey, New York area, then definitely your kids are going to be transitioning back in September. But if you're in Texas, you know, Georgia, X, Y, and Z, those states, there are officially back today or next week, okay? Which is a great feeling. But what I'm doing this month for the month of August, I'm going to be sharing every week that I'm here, every Wednesday at 11 a.m. We're going to be talking about um, leadership, leading schools that thrive, especially if you're a superintendent, you're a principal, assistant principal. And I'm going to be sharing 4 leadership lesson every Wednesday of how you can lead your school by applying these things, lead it more effectively, I shall say, as someone who is going to be overseeing hundreds of students, staff members, a building, parents, all the things. But before we get into all of that and start in today's conversation, let me introduce myself because I may have some new individuals here. Welcome to the Lead Like a CEO show. I'm your host, Chevy, and what I do, I help superintendents and principals like yourself to lead high performance school without losing themselves in the process or running themselves into the ground. And I do that in multiple ways, whether that's through one-on-one executive coaching or operational support, where I actually come into your school, whether that's hybrid, virtually, or in person, and I help you to lead a high performance school. And yes, and as someone who's retired Air Force of 22 plus years, I am an author of my book, Woman Breed, which is really focused on helping women to lead through life, career, and business while thriving in every season, no matter what is happening. Okay. And that is part of what I bring into these leaders who hires me, who decides to hire me, but also my company to support them, whether it's leadership or operational support. Okay. And I'm a facilitator, trainer, and I have over 10 plus years of being in the classroom, traveling, teaching, helping organizations to run their leaders to run effective operations, but also facilitating, teaching at every level, whether it's, young adults in the military to senior leaders in the military as well. So I am speaking from lived experience. And a bonus, I love educated training and developing folks. Okay. So today's conversation is going to be also surrounded around my S4 leadership framework. And this is something that is already in my book, but this is what I use to support leaders, schools, and so forth. And today we're going to be talking about the the leadership mirror. Okay, so as you come in, before I get into the leadership mirror and the topic that we're speaking about today, I want you to drop in the chat where you are joining from, who you are, and what you do. Because again, I'm all about building community and connecting folks because I'm a connector as well too. But today's topic we're focused on, and the first pillar that we're focused on, part of the framework, is a self-awareness piece. And we're going to go through each pillar every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Central, right here. So stay tuned, invite a friend. But today's conversation, we're talking about the leadership mirror and why school transformation starts with the leader. Okay. And I'm going to share some insight from my own lived experience from being an instructor, but also being a leader in the military from my lived experience. Okay. And we're talking about the leadership mirror. And what does that mean? So when I say the leadership mirror, I want you to, really not just look at the position you're in or the role that you're in as a superintendent, as a principal, or a school leader. I want you to really look at yourself in that mirror and do a self assessment. And I want you to answer this. When was the last time you did your own self assessment on you? When was the last time you did your own self assessment on how you lead and how you show up in that role as a superintendent, in that role as a principal, in that role as an assistant principal, in that role as an educator, as a classroom instructor, like literally when was the last time you did your own leadership assessment? To ask yourself, what are you doing well as that leader? That's one question. Where are your blind spots? Because we all have blind spots. Okay. And what feedback are you receiving from your staff, receiving from your subordinates, receiving from your students, based on how you're showing up, based on your behavior? And I want to, and the reason I'm saying that you need to do a self assessment because it really allows you to really be honest with yourself, be truthful, and identify things that you may not think that you're doing, but you're actually doing it because other people see these things. For example, quick example, like my son, we were driving. Well, I was driving. I think he was driving, and then he is still a teenager, and he's, he has his license. He's navigating the road, but also as a parent and a mom, I am more. I have more expertise in driving because I've been driving since I was at the age of 18, and years has passed. And with him, sometimes he moves a little slower than what I would like because I'm like, hey, if you're turning, I need you to like turn and kind of put a little bit on the gas because you have other cars trying to turn and who are behind you. And one thing he said to me, and maybe you have kids and your kids probably say certain things, you're like, no, but then it's like it clicks in your head and like, yeah, I do that. And he's like, mommy, sometimes you are, you can be impatient. And I was like, you right, buddy. You are right. Because sometimes I like things to get done in that moment, like let's go. Okay, which it's good for me, but also not for everyone. Like my kids be like, oh mommy. But in that moment, that was an assessment that he brought to my awareness. So again, what are some things that you're doing, like maybe your staff is saying that you're not acknowledging because you're just you're in your own way. So before you continue to step fully into this new school year, I want you to really do a self-assessment. I'm not saying take a Myers-Briggs. I'm not saying take a DISC. I'm saying take your own self-assessment and ask simple questions. How am I showing up? How am I leading? How am I communicating? What are the staff seeing? What am I projecting on my team? So you have to look at, this is the leadership mirror because we're focused on that self-awareness piece of the framework. Okay. And another aspect when we look at the leadership assessment, we have to look at how do we regulate ourselves as we are fully leading in our role, in our capacity. And I talk a lot about the emotional regulation because as someone who has experienced the ups and the ebbs and flows of life and leadership and military challenges, anxiety, and all these things, regulating, or I'm gonna throw this in there, co-parenting, because even while you're leading in this school capacity, you are still dealing with life challenges, and all of that impacts how you show up for yourself, for your school, for your students, for your staff, for the parents, for your community, but also for your family as well. So we have to look at the emotional regulation because every school leader, you are going to experience challenges. You're going to experience pressure. You're going to be operating under pressure from someone who has lived it in the military for 22 years. I do understand that sometimes things happen. Sometimes your emotions will not be intact. Sometimes you are going to yell. Sometimes you're going to scream. Sometimes you're like, but the key thing that I want you to remember and apply is how do you remain regulated through all of the nonsense, through all of the crap and bull, what that will happen as you are leading this school, as you're leading your staff and so forth. Because when you're able to regulate your emotions, you are able to communicate more effectively. You're able to make more effective decisions. You're able to create a culture that thrives. You're able to create a culture that understands that when there's pressure, we still regulate because it's a ripple effect. Because how you respond impacts the staff, which impacts the students, which impacts the learning outcome, which impacts performance. So it's a ripple effect. So that's why I am saying, and I'm going to say this over and over in the work that I do, we focus on you as the leader, because we have to focus on you first and how you're showing up, how you're leading, but also how you are executing in that space as a superintendent, principal, AP, classroom instructor, instructional designer. Like, it starts with you as that school leader. Okay. And I want to share something, because I want to make sure that you understand that sometimes we are on the go. And I mean on the go. When you are in those roles and you are leading at a high level, high capacity, and you're responsible for hundreds of people, resources, all of it. Okay. And it's a lot of emotional pressure, physical pressure as well. And that regulation piece is critical for your success as a leader. Like, seriously, because when you're having that meeting, someone's going to say something, they're going to roll their eyes, they're going to be talking to another person on the side when you're like, but all of those things are things that will happen, but you have to decide, how do I respond in this space? And when I was on active duty as an instructor, and we had a whole bunch of other instructors. And at one point, one instructor, she was doing inspection on the airmen's uniform. And the airmen, they were all lined up for inspection that morning. And I believe, from what I recall, one of the airmen or two were still, playing around, talking, just joking, not listening. And because of the frustration that the teacher felt, that instructor felt, that instructor started to yell and curse. Okay. And we're like, okay, what's happening? Because of the student's behavior, she responded a certain way. And then we had to be like, whoa, let's let's pause for a second. Because of that response, now the student is looking like, whoa, inappropriate. Now she's being viewed in a different light from her student, the staff. And all of that is because she felt she did not have control. But if that individual, I would say, took the time to, like, okay, I see we playing around here. I see we are clowns today. Like, you have to look at, how do you respond to these things? Because I don't be like, okay, we having a good time. I guess we'll be, like, you have, as the facilitator, as the instructor, you have to look at, how do you navigate that space? Because for me, I can look at that situation, and I've been in situations where students, fell asleep in the class during, live instructions, or whether they're in the lab. And I know how to regulate myself, but still get that student's attention and still have them understand, like, hey, I'm not playing. Let's get it together, X, Y, without having to dysregulate my emotions. And that same instructor said to me, Sarmek, how the heck you're able to correct the students without getting to that level? And I had to explain to her, like, there's a process. It's emotional regulations. I don't have to yell and cuss. Yes, my voice will be raised for sure, but that student will understand. And as a leader who is running the school, who's overseeing hundreds of students as a whole, do understand. And I understand you're not in the classroom. I do understand it, because from someone who has been part of that world, in the sense of being an instructor supervisor, pushing out over 1,000 students as a whole within my organization annually, making sure they graduate. I understand, but you have to regulate your emotions. That is key. And the third thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the leadership lesson that I want you to apply every single day. We talked about the leadership assessment. That is something that you should be doing daily. Even it's like it should take you it could be one question. And also the emotional regulation, applying that every single day. And the third thing that I want to talk about that you need to apply is that decision making process. Okay? Because every decision that you communicate, whether you make the decision or don't make it, you are still communicating a decision. And I've said this before. Whether you make the decision or don't make it, you are still making a decision, my friend. So, my question to you, how are you making decisions? Are you taking forever, weeks, months? Okay. Are you consistently uh, making reactive decisions? How are you making your decisions? Because again, your decisions affect how you communicate as a leader. Also, it impacts how your people make decisions as well. If they're waiting on you to make a decisions, or they're waiting on you because no decisions are being made, which affects their process, which affects the students. So again, as a school leader, whether you're a superintendent, principal, AP, and you are stepping in for the first year, for the second, third, fourth, fifth year, whatever that year is for you, I want you to really look in the mirror and apply that leadership mirror to you. And one thing that I did when I was on active duty, when I did my performance report with my subordinates, I would, whether it was their initial, their mid, or their annual, what I did and what I wanted from them as well too was for them to assess me as their supervisor. And what I did, I gave them my expectations, whether it was in, the instructor world where I had, subordinates who were instructors. Here are your expectations. And then when we have our midterm, before I would give them my feedback and my rating of where they're performing, I would have them self-assess themselves based on what I ask of them to perform at this specific level to get to this marking, and also how they view themselves based on our conversations, based on their performance. And what I realized, they would mark themselves, depending on the individual, at a level higher than me, and sometimes right at the level where I mark them or below. And what I did, I will let them share, and then I will share with them exactly, here's where I marked you, but here's why, and based on evidence. And then if they did mark themselves above, I will have them share with me why they felt they were marked, they believe they at this point, and I would listen. And then also what I did now, because with the military, you're also not only being rated on your performance, you're also competing with other people in the same grade level for certain ratings and so forth. So I always let them know, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what you're seeing, but also here's the gap. So as someone who is in a leadership position, you have to give yourself that self-assessment, because there's always room for growth. There's always blind spots that we are not seeing, especially when you are in the throw of everything. Like if you are in the business, if you are at capacity, there are things that you are missing. So if you have an opportunity, or when you have an opportunity, even if it's at home, even if it's in your office, after hours, or maybe before or during your break, I want you to really take that time as a school leader and see how you can get better, not only in the role, but as a leader. So I want you to really implement this leadership mirror, which is focused on the self-awareness aspect. And this is just part of my framework of self-awareness. And we have 3 more to go for the rest of the month, but it's looking at your self-assessment, how you see yourself, that emotional regulations, which is going to be key to your success, and also decision making. How are you making decisions, or are you not making decisions? Because this will impact how you perform as a school leader, but also it impacts your team, your students, your performance. Because my goal is to help you lead a high performing school, but not only thrives in a sense of performance, but also the people as a whole. So, if what I shared today in this conversation um, really resonated with you today, and you feel like, hey, I would love to hear more of this, I want to invite you um, to be a part of my community. And the reason I want to invite you is because this framework, which is my S4 leadership framework, and this framework really helps school leaders strengthen their self awareness, their strength, their stewardship, and sustainability when it comes to the work that they do, not only for the school, but for them as well, because we focus on the people and the operations. So you can lead a healthy, high performance school where both things are happening. The people and the performance are thriving, not just the performance, but the people and the performance. That is the goal. Okay. So, like I said, if this conversation resonated with you and you want to be in community with other leaders who are really not just sitting in a position, but who are truly looking at sustainability, not only in the sense of how they're leading the school, but also for themselves as the leader, so that they can continue to lead in an effective, high performance school, but also the people are actually excited and enjoy the work that they do as well too. And I want you to invite you to my Facebook community, which is where you can send me a DM and I'll send you the link, or you can go to Facebook and look it up. And it's School Leaders Who Lead Well. That is the name of the group. And on the 18th, I'm going to be hosting a workshop in there as well, to where we continue this conversation as well. So if you are listening to this now, maybe later on, I want you to send me a DM with the word lead well to get access to the Facebook group, or you can just look it up on Facebook, like I said. But today was me just sharing part of my framework for you to understand that as you step into this role, whether for the first time, the second time, like I said, I want to kind of remind you that through all of the things that will happen during the school year, that I want you to start with you, and that starts with that leadership mirror, and that encompasses that self-awareness piece, because that leadership is key. That self-leadership, it is key. That emotional regulation is critical. That decision-making process is impactful. It could be good, or it can go 2 ways. All right. So that is where we're starting. And next week, we are going to go to the second pillar. My throat. 1 second. Next week, we're talking about leading through resistance and pressure. Okay. So, from someone who lived that 22 years in the military, leading in high stress, high pressure environments, this is going to be a great conversation. So, definitely stay tuned for next Wednesday, same time. But I want to thank you all for joining me live here. If you're watching this, #replay. And again, I invite you to the Facebook group. And this, like I said, this framework is in my book. This is what we go deeper in a sense of, when you work with me, whether that's through one-on-one coaching, executive coaching, through operations, because sustainability is really focused on how do we sustain the performance and so forth. But also, I said executive leadership, operations, but also speaking, as well too. So this framework is the anchor for what we do in Mac Leadership Academy, part of it. So if you're at a school, superintendent, principal, and you're like, hey, we need to bring Chevy in, whether that's through coaching, executive coaching, training for your staff, or to really help you elevate the operations, how things are run, how things are executed, or to do a speaking at your event, I would love for you to connect with me. You can email me, or you can just send me a simple DM right here on LinkedIn. And I want to thank you all for joining me on the Lead Like a CEO show. I'm your host, Chevy, and helping superintendents and a principal like yourself to lead high performing schools without losing themselves in the process or running themselves into the ground trying to lead that school. And as your 22 plus year Air Force retired veteran, I'm the author of Woman Breed, helping you to lead through life, career, and business while thriving in every season. I am a facilitator, trainer, and speaker, and I want you guys to have an amazing day as always. See y'all.